there are a lot of celebrities that do have these sort of alternate personalities. And that's kind of what the metaverse is offering you as a general populace. You know, it's like they've kind of done this with the elite. Now they're like turning this over to the common person, and you can become multiple people and have, you know, multiple things.
So let's talk about the metaverse. Is it good? Is it bad? Or is it somewhere in between?
Find out on this episode of LED Live.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of LED Live. We're glad that you can be with us this Friday. We have a special guest to talk to us about a question you guys have been asking about, the metaverse, virtual reality. And so today we have Dr. Tim Reisenberger, and he is going to talk to us about some of the scientific implications, and we're going to talk about the spiritual implications of the metaverse. So, Dr. Reisenberger, what is your background, just a little bit for our audience?
Sure. I am an emergency medicine physician. I trained in medical school at Loma Linda University.
Okay.
I did my residency training at Stanford University. I have a master's in preventive medicine. I'm board certified in emergency medicine, and I'm a massage therapist because that's what
Awesome.
I did before medicine.
Nice.
So if we get stressed out, you know,
Okay.
can loosen
Get the
us
rub
up.
down.
I have a little time after the show.
All right. Well, a lot of you have been asking about the metaverse, and you know, people want to know, is this good? Is this bad? And we have a tendency to look at these things from, you know, a scientific perspective and a general media perspective, and we also want to know, is this good? Is it bad? What should we know if we are going to enter VR? I remember went to Chicago a few years ago, and they had the I was at a convention for teachers, and there was this Loma Linda University Hospital was there. They had this VR set up, and there was a game for kids. And of course, my son is all into technology, and he wanted to try it out. I was like, okay, you can try it out, you know. So he goes in, and it was basically constructing a skeleton, you know, and it takes like a minute or two, something like that. And then he's done, you know. It's like, okay, short period of time. I did VR once, kind of freaked me out a little bit. The reason it freaked me out, it was a game. I think it was my brother-in-law's, and he had a PlayStation or something, and I was going downhill in a sled on the road, you know, like a wheeled sled or something. And the whole point was to avoid the cars, right? So you're going downhill. It feels fast. It's telling your brain it's fast. You're going, and the whole point is just avoid the cars. So you know you're guiding yourself with your head and stuff. Make sure you don't hit the cars. And invariably, what are you going to do? I mean, it's the first time.
You're going to hit the car.
You're going to hit the car. The moment that I knew, like, I'm going to hit that car, it was the weirdest feeling. It was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to die.
You're waiting for the pain.
You know, you're waiting for it. Was so realistic.
It's called norepinephrine. Epinephrine, that's what that's called.
So realistic that it just like freaked me out a little bit. My son did the one where he's in a shark cage, you know, and you're in the ocean, and you know, waiting around, and eventually the shark comes from you, and he was just like about ready to throw the thing off because it was so realistic. And now we're seeing with metaverse, this is looking like it's going to become a multi-billion-dollar industry. I mean, I've even read reports of people talking about buying real estate in the metaverse.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Think about that. Like,
Yep. I mean, a lot of the technology that we're paying attention to right now, of even just blending gaming technology with cinematography, they're developing content now with the forward thinking of it's going into the metaverse.
yeah.
And so, you know, it's pretty nuts what they're capable of right now, but I mean, it's going to get real strange. I mean, you know, we're not going to be in Kansas very long. Here.
No.
I mean,
And I think that's true. Yeah.
Like, what's the point of it, though? Like, just having people live here, but not really here. Like, why would you buy a house in the metaverse? Or I've seen people also buy Gucci bags for thousands of dollars. And I'm like, in the metaverse, but why?
Yeah, but why would you buy a Bitcoin, right? Now look what it's worth. It's basically what people are willing to pay for
Right.
it.
And that makes sense in terms of cryptocurrency, but it's like,
It's a step in that direction. though.
Yeah.
That's
You know,
the whole point.
I stopped trying to understand this world after I saw little Farmville and people were dumping thousands of dollars into it
Of real money.
of real money
Yes.
for no apparent reason. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, what? This is just a game, but
Yeah.
this is where we are.
Well, if you're willing to fork out $1 billion for Avengers, right, to continue in the Marvel universe,
Yeah.
wow, how much are you continuing for the continuity in the metaverse?
You know what? I've
Wow.
never thought of that
Yeah.
before, but what if all of these multiverse type things are literally preparing people to say, hey, there's these alternate. I mean, people are already thinking that there's alternate universes out there.
Sure.
And I wonder how much the media is playing into that. But it's like all of this is like convening together.
It's the Matrix.
It is.
If they
It's gonna
convince
have a
you
whole
that
new meaning.
The
we
problem
already
is-
live in a simulation, then what's the difference if I go in this simulation? It feels more fun in here. I can be who I want to be. I can be with who I want to be with.
I have no meaning in the real universe, but now I have value, I have meaning in the
You can be a
metaverse.
superstar.
And I think in
crazy.
a weird way, it's like this whole idea of I can create an avatar, a thing I can identify with however I want to. I can be a man, I can be a woman, I can be a machine, I can be an alien,
A dog,
whatever, a dog.
exactly.
You know what I mean? I can see what life is like through the perspective of that thing, but there's no consequences to it. I think we're all the way back to the Garden of Eden with the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and you're not really going to die. It's just this fake world or whatever that he's creating. This is just like a complicated version of that first lie.
Absolutely.
So for the concerned parents out there, and I'm sure there's concerned parents. I mean, you know, those of us that have kids, we're concerned parents.
Go to the hills.
What are the physiological implications of VR?
Well, I think that's pretty clear that the key with your brain is as a man thinketh, so is he, right? By beholding we are become changed, 2 Corinthians 3:18. And that's the concept, is that God has hardwired our brain to say that thinking, right, is very, very similar to reality. In fact, God calls it the same thing. It's like you become what you think about, you become what you look at. And researchers in Parma, Italy, the classic sort of study that was referenced in Magic Kingdom, one of your videos that I, of course, grew up with and enjoyed tremendously, showed that with these monkeys, unfortunately, one of the researchers had left a bunch of peanuts out. It wasn't, completely cleaned up. And the janitor was there, and they left the electrode on the monkey's brain. And when the monkey would eat the peanut, right?
Yeah.
That was kind of the issue, is that it would fire motor neurons because it's grabbing, right, the peanut. But the key is that the janitor actually heard the electrode fire when the monkey saw him clean up the peanut. So in other words, they began to realize that your brain can't distinguish between what it's actually doing and what it's actually seeing. And then they follow that up with functional MRI, and they show people these, facial expressions. And they ask you, okay, imitate the facial expressions, right? But the same areas of the brain are pretty much lighting up, right? When you look at that funny expression, or if you make it. And that's not 100% bad, right? Because if I tell you, hey, do a cartwheel. Well, what's a cartwheel? Well, let me show you. If I show you how to do the cartwheel, your brain has to fire those motor neurons, right, to now be able to replicate that motor neuron. And I just want to say that there's nothing bad intrinsically with watching someone do something so that you can then imitate them, right? But the question is really, is the media itself damaging? Is the actual experience of VR and the metaverse, as we're talking about, is that intrinsically damaging or not? And that's really the question. And when we see with functional MRI, those areas your brain's lighting up, right? Your brain has trouble with differentiating between seeing something and doing something. So that's kind of the start, right? So when you look at that concept, is what do you want your kids to be doing? right?
Right.
That's really the question.
Right.
And if you want your kids to be doing something positive, perhaps it can be helpful, right? There was a study that just came out this year on soccer players with chronic low back pain, right? And they randomized them into 3 groups. Control group, right? Nothing, right?
Yeah.
If you do no therapy, obviously you're not going to get better, right? Versus traditional, you see the physical therapy, they go through the exercise, they give you a sheet of exercise, send you home, and you don't do those exercises until you come back to the physical therapist again, right? That's unfortunately the level of compliance is very poor. But what they've tried to do is they said, okay, we're going to do a VR therapist, and these are your sessions, and are you going to interact with the VR person? Well, of course you are, right? Because they've shown that the mirror, just a 3D mirror increases compliance for people doing exercise. And this study showed that at 4 weeks and then at 6 months that VR was superior to reality.
Wow.
And so that's the thing, is that can this be used to get your kids to exercise? Well, sure, if the Nintendo Wii can get your kids to exercise, probably the VR can get them to exercise even more, because the number one reason why people continue exercising is doing it with someone else.
Right.
And if you feel you're doing it with someone else, right? And remember, your brain has trouble differentiating just with 2D or 3D, right? Seeing versus doing. Now this is surround sound, right? This is actually puffs of air.
You're
can
hiking
feel...
on the top of Everest.
Yeah, exactly. Pressure suits
know?
now. So will your kid be more compliant with exercise in VR? Probably. But the question is, how is this going to affect them? Go ahead.
So I remember when we did the documentary Pseudology, that was really just trying to get to the bottom of, like, is the television affecting you?
Yes.
One of the doctors that he was a neurologist in, actually a neurologist that dealt with psychology in Los Angeles area. And he had specifically worked with VR to help patients that had been through war. And there was these real crazy, like, post-traumatic PTSD, and really these really psychological problems that they were trying to get to the bottom of and resolve. And one way that they would do it was through the use of VR. They would put the people back in a war setting.
Sure.
They gave them a fake gun, rubber gun, and then they all of a sudden had all these people dying all around them, and then they'd walk them through that process, and that was somehow helping them.
Desensitization.
Yeah,
That's
something
what they
helping them through that.
Sure.
And that always struck me as, like, strange. Like, if you have all this, like, fear of that experience, why would you want to go back to that experience? And it was for exactly what you said. That process of being there enough times desensitized you to the point where you could then manage and live a normal life. And they could help you through that process. So it's like, if you're watching all this crazy, sinful stuff, is that basically, inching you closer to acceptance of that activity or whatever, Fortnite, if you're running around playing Fortnite all day long,
Well, sure, and I think that your concept is very valid, because what they've found in studies as far as how does VR affect the brain, how does VR affect memories, like a traumatic memory or whatever, what they found is they use different types of media to embed a memory in children, to basically create reality in your kid's mind. The 4 to 6 year olds, they were able to fool them with the same success by using audio clues, taking a picture where they photoshopped them. Hey, this is you swimming with orcas. Do you remember that?
Oh,
right? And then they gave them the VR experience to try to embed the memory. Now, the 46-year-olds, they'll say anything, basically. So it was
so cool.
It was no different. It was no different. Now, the 7 to approximately 12-year-olds, like the elementary school age kids, they found that VR was highly successful in embedding a false memory.
Oh, wow.
Into them. So again,
That's
they
fascinating.
can use VR on your kids.
Terrifying.
And your kids are so impressionable. It's like, I always tell people, when you're young, your brain is plastic, basically. And that's, there's huge implications for that. Like, for us as guys who aren't married, or those of you maybe who are married, maybe that's an implication. But the concept is that if you marry and you're younger, you have a higher risk of divorce. Like at basically, if you're a teenager, it's 90%, right?
Wow.
But as you go over time, if it's first-time marriages, by the way, if you divorce once, it's always easy to do again, right? And that's the concept with sin, right? It's easy to do it over and over again once you've kind of opened Pandora's box, so to speak. But they found that it was like mid-20s to late 20s. And they're like, well, why is that? And then the research kind of caught up and said, well, your neurons don't finish myelinating until late 20s for guys. Girls are sooner. Obviously, you guys mature sooner as far as brain anatomy and physiology. And so the earlier you're going at these individuals, right, when you're looking at a 4 to 6-year-old, it's hard for them to distinguish fantasy from reality. And we know that, right? They have imaginary friends, right? They talk to them. But the thing is, they grow out of that, right? Do you have like, is your 7, 10, 11, 12-year-old still talking to their imaginary friend? I hope not, right? But if they're 4, that's probably a normal behavior, right? But the problem is that when you're 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and with VR, we can plant now memories. And those kids said it was a real memory.
Wow.
When they said, remember when you were doing this? And they would Photoshop there, because they can actually put you, like Mikey and I were reviewing this video, they put the lady on the other side of the screen in the video, her reflection. They can do that now and create an avatar of you. But now with Photoshop and even voice clips, you can have the kids say something.
I think another thing that's really alarming, you're bringing up a lot of things here, but the idea of like other people being able to enter into this universe simultaneously together, right? You're worried about who your kid's playing with already.
Yeah.
Like what house are you going over to and all that, right? Now you're talking about putting that child in a totally unique environment where other people could have access to that endlessly.
Yeah.
I think this is a recipe for disaster.
You think about, you know, if you can be whatever you want to be, let's say, you know, your 8-year-old wants to be 16. You know, your 8-year-old wants to be 24.
And people are going to treat
And
them
that's
like
what their
that.
avatar
Appear to be.
in the metaverse.
And they look
And
like
the other
that
person
in their
doesn't
avatar.
know that.
You know what I mean? They're going to start approaching them as that age.
Wow.
I mean, I just think that this is
There's
not,
a lot
this
of
is not
ethical
good.
implications.
This is not good.
Where you need controls.
And I think that that's really the question, is where are the ethics? Another study at Stanford, out of my alma mater, they looked at impulse control in children. And they used a great study design, right? They used Grover, right? Super Grover, right? And Super Grover was playing Simon Says with them. And we had just the same clip, right? We created a VR clip of Super Grover playing it versus, you know, a 2D television screen for Super Grover. And the key is that on the screen, they were much better able with impulse control. But once you created a VR Grover, they lost the impulse control. And the implications there are, of course, economic, right? The concept is that I want to remove your impulse control when you're wanting to spend, right? And I mean, we can do that in tangible ways, right? If you actually have to do something to go beyond your inhibitions, then it's harder. That's why the Bible says, make not provision for the flesh to fulfill the lust thereof, right? You get rid of your cigarettes. You cut your internet connection at home. Maybe just access the internet for a while in the library.
you don't go to the bar.
Yeah, you don't go to the bar. You get rid of all your credit cards and pay everything with cash, because they found that the act of reaching in your pocket
Hurts.
yeah. And to do that can be bypassed with a credit card a little bit easier.
Interesting.
And the thing is that if we've already seen that children lose impulse control, when you create a VR situation of the identical situation, what are the implications there? I think it's very clear. I think you're going to have impulse control issues in the metaverse.
So are you aware of any studies about impulse control in childhood? Let's say,
Absolutely.
you know, they have
The marshmallow.
Not-
That's the classic one.
Yeah, the marshmallow one. But where they really didn't have any checks and balances when they were young, have those children been followed over time as adults, and how did they turn out?
I think the Marshmallow Study is a good one. And I don't know exactly if it was nurture versus nature. Were they seeing the problems at home for the first time during the Marshmallow Study? But essentially the Marshmallow Study, and there's various permutations of it, is here's a marshmallow. Not to say that you're the child, but you're just at my convenient left hand here. Here's a marshmallow. Now, if you wait till I come back, I'll give you 2. And they just started the clock. How long could the child resist the marshmallow?
Interesting.
And the concept is that some kids were able to go huge amounts of time, but many kids were like, As soon as the researcher went out the room, they ate the marshmallow. And they found that that was implicated not just in academic success and financial success, level of education, marital success, jail time. So ultimately, our ability to resist following our heart is actually the trigger for success, not following our heart. Like you guys show in your clips. I love that basically kaleidoscope clip where you show all of the instances where Disney says that. And it's like every single show, every single movie that comes up. So ultimately, yes, it's very clear that the more you can delay gratification, the more you can put a lid on the impulse control, you're successful in all areas of life. Because ultimately, right, we have a fallen nature.
I notice this in my children when they eat food. My daughter has always been, she'll take a look at the plate and she'll figure out which thing she likes the most. And it goes, pushes off to the side. And I mean, it'll like literally systematically eat around that thing until it's like the very last thing. And like my son's just straight like, cake?
Exactly.
You know, it's like, then he's too full to eat the salad or whatever, right?
But he's learned delayed gratification at an early age.
But my wife and I have noticed this in our children, and we have encouraged, you know, like this behavior in my son, and he's actually transformed and changed. Now he is actually leaving the things he desires the most for the last. He'll eat all his vegetables and salad and stuff like that first, and it's great.
And
I do that too.
And that's the concept, is that we always have had traditionally, because of honestly, we have a Puritan work ethic. Many of us are related to the people that came over, right? They found that, 80% of the U.S. is actually immigrants. So most of us here now can trace our roots back to somebody who came over here from some other country. So genetically, we have that Quaker, we have that Puritan work ethic. And really, that's what has made America great, right? Is that people can trust American quality. People can trust when you say you're going to pay this back. Yes, I'll pay it back. I don't know how we're going to pay back. What is 30 trillion now? But that's more than, maybe the metaverse will help us make that back, right? That's right. So that's the concept, is that you traditionally, genetically, have the desire to work first, play later, right? But if your job is in the metaverse, right, then that becomes very blurred, doesn't it? And that's the whole concept, is that even with the phones, I think we can all attest, right?
Hard to put it down.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, I'm on the phone, and I've got this message or whatever. Oh, I went to do research last night when we picked up our phones, right? We can all attest to the fact that it's hard to stay on task when you have that phone, even if you turn all the banners off, even if you turn whatever. Maybe I'll check that email or whatever. You get distracted very easily, right? And that's the concept, is that there's already health implications for screen time of any media, right? You know, and there's all-cause mortality studies on that already. You know, so is VR going to be even more distracting for you? Because it's like, if you're trying to do your job and someone can interact with you on the metaverse, instead of sending you a notification, they can walk by and say, hey, what about this? Would you like to buy this? No, I don't want to buy that. So if you have to actually wave that person away now, rather than just turn them off, right? Is that going to be harder?
Can you imagine advertising? Like, if you can't block advertising, it's like the Geico gecko comes by and it's like wants to sell you on insurance.
He's like at your front door.
That makes me wonder, what matters to us a lot is like physical contact with other people. So how do you think the metaverse is going to affect that? Like, it sounds like it's going to breed a lot of dissatisfaction and probably increase depression. Or can virtual reality actually give you a sense that you are in close contact with someone?
Well, a lot of people have asked me why. I mean, and Scotty can tell you this, I'm a big hug guy. I'm a big hugger. People don't like that necessarily. And
small bubble.
Exactly. Most people are like, oh, okay. Or they'll do the like, you know, whatever, the side or whatnot. But they've actually shown in real studies that this close proximity that you have is so powerful. Not just for the people involved, but I mean, your health, your well-being, your development. I mean, you have mice studies, right? And now they've replicated that on orphan sort of studies. Is mice, when they're born, what does the mother immediately start doing to them, do you think? Licking them, right? But they actually have simulated everything with that lick. They created a little brush that was exactly the same. They all died.
Wow.
There is a difference between a virtual touch and a real touch. There's a vast difference. And then they repeated that in orphans, right? They were given this mechanical sort of touch, the same thing that simulated a hug. They simulated the vertical motion that kids all love because of the womb, everything. They tried to like do all of that, and they didn't thrive.
Yeah.
There is something that goes on when you have a real embrace. And that's why I tell people is I'm actually just being selfish. I'm actually just drawing that power because I'm working on an age reversal program right now. And I know I'm the oldest person in this room already. But that's the thing.
You grew up on Magic Kingdom.
How could you have age reversal if you grew up on Magic Kingdom? I said I grew up on the Magic Kingdom documentary. That's the thing, because there's a difference. I think, like we talk about, is the media itself bad? And we all know that the screen takes you from beta wave to alpha almost immediately. In fact, the more you do it, like the first time you watch the screen, it takes a little while, but the second time, your brain waves are in alpha like within seconds. And so we understand that the media itself, yes, does that. But the thing is, when I'm watching Magic Kingdom, I'm actively engaging. It's like, oh, wow, I never saw that. I know, oh, wow, that's wrong, right? And so when you're in alpha, things tend to enter into your subconscious and embed a lot easier. But when you're in beta, like with Scotty and Tommy pointing out, like, hey, do you know the scene in Fight Club where they talk against God? I had no idea they do that. So immediately I'm going to go look at it. And I'm like, I had no idea they said this, even though it's a long sort of like scene, right? But it's just going into the subconscious. But when you're in beta, when you're critically analyzing something, totally different ball game with your brain.
So,
like, and because it comes into motive, right? Why did you go through those scenes? It's not to like enjoy Fight Club again, but to say, you know what? How dare they talk about my God that way? You know, and what are the implications if Brad Pitt just tells me we're God's unwanted children?
You had a question?
Yeah.
Oh, I have two.
Sure.
My first one. So
Save your questions. Keep building them up.
So because I know a lot of people try to justify watching movies because they say you have to be careful with when you're in that hypnotic phase, like where you're just staring at the screen, you can't hear what's going on around you.
You're alpha brain waving.
Right. So,
massage does the same thing though.
Yeah.
There's lots of things like when you're on the road and you're listening to music and you're zoning out, or someone's talking to you and you're like, yeah. Oh, I just missed my exit. Right. So that's also alpha brain waving, you know.
Yeah.
So there's lots of ways you can go into alpha. It's just a relaxed state, but you become highly suggestible. That's my point.
So is it possible, like, let's say you want to justify watching this movie because you're saying, you know what, I want to go in and analyze it. Is it, compared to watching a documentary, if you're watching like Transformers, for example, is it easier for you to go in with that motive and stay in your, what is it, beta?
Thinking.
Your thinking, your to be able to think through it, or will you easily slip into the alpha wave?
It's hard to answer that, and I think really Scotty might have the best answer. And I remember you were looking at anime at one point, and someone said, absolutely do not watch the Death Note. Let me just tell you what it's about, because the thing is that think about what is different in a documentary versus an actual Hollywood-made movie. And you guys know this, having been in Hollywood. Everything in Hollywood is down to the T. Like I remember you guys saying, that little thing in the background, that's not an accident. The color of that is not an accident. The name of that person is not an accident. The music playing, did you know the music playing in the background will get not only your emotions, but your hormones in line for what's coming?
Wow,
It's absolutely, everything is done exactly on cue. There's nothing accidental. Whereas the documentary, right? We don't have music playing during our interview, right? I mean, we have stuff at the beginning, at the end, right? But everything in the background wasn't designed for creating that mood, creating that emotion. And that's really what they're wanting to do, is create an emotion, right? Because they know that that's 50% of your character, because thoughts and feelings combined make up the moral character, and we ignore the role of feelings, right? We try to stuff our feelings and resist our feelings. No, create positive feelings with God. You know, when you look at the admonition, it's righteousness, joy, and peace in the Holy Ghost. How many of those things are emotions? 2 out of 3, right? Are emotions. So I think that we forget that these movies are trying to create a certain, not only message in your mind, but they're trying to create an emotion in your mind. And the thing is, what I often do, like when I'm looking at something, like I can't remember who it was, but Steve Chang, you know Steve Chang, he's a dentist. He did a post on Alita, Battle Angel, you know what I mean? And let me just say, it's 100% false gospel. Alita's Satan, the big guy who rules in the city sky above. Who's that? Well, you know. And the city's name is Zalem, but the real name is Jerusalem.
Oh, wow.
Come on. I mean, it's like, it's so obvious.
Can't make that stuff up.
It's so obvious, right? Every show, you guys pointed out, every sort of superhero movie, the big bad guy is always the God figure, constantly. So they're trying to create not only information in your head, but they're trying to create a narrative. So just what I recommend if people have to do something like Scotty, and I don't know if you've done this, is I will turn on the subtitles and turn off the volume.
Wow. My wife.
So I don't get any music. I don't get any like surround sound or whatever. I just get the text of what they're saying, and I can see some of the visual.
That's an interesting thing. I haven't tried that one. My wife will watch things with the subtitles, and so she can definitely hear and read and think about what's being said and stuff like that. But that's interesting to just totally shut it off and just listen to that. Because I have turned the music off, and it's like, it's not even interesting, you know? It's like you kind of just like look at it and you're like, this is whatever. But you turn the music on, you're all wrapped up into it.
Because your emotion.
What I would say to you is I think there's media is so complex, and the way that we approach the media is very complex. And what I think that is sort of going back to the metaverse thing. I think the more that you put yourself in front of that, the more desensitized you get to those types of messages. So if you are just saying, well, I'm going to watch this, I'm going to try to find out everything that's wrong with it. You know, you watch The Matrix and Transformers and all this kind of Gnostic stuff all the time. It's interesting to see how less and less you'll be able to actually really point those things out. I think it's by not watching them that your sensitivity actually goes up. And when you see things that are awry or off, then you're kind of like, you know, no, that's not right. And you get kind of wrapped up into the storyline the more that you engage in it. I think some people go into it with a, you know, I want to watch this because I want to know what they're doing, and I'm going to watch the whole thing. And I just think enough of that over time is going to desensitize you.
And that's the key, is that a lot of people make the accusation, well, how can you guys comment on this? You haven't even watched it, sort of thing like that. But that's the whole concept. Do you have to say that murder is wrong by not experiencing murder? Do you have to say, well, you know, we finally decided pornography is bad because we watched all of the films. I mean, do you really have to do that? I mean, you just present that to someone and they'll finally see, okay, I can see how it can affect you. And I'll just give you a classic example of what Scotty's saying, is that I had a friend of mine, his kids were 6 and 8, and they had never, ever seen a screen of any kind.
Whoa.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable, right? Wow. Like I'm trying to tell people, listen, France is moving towards age 6 and below is illegal of screen in every kind. I have colleagues who are child psychiatrists. They won't make a diagnosis of ADD or ADHD or any psychiatric diagnosis until there's no screen time for 6 months. I had one parent say, that's impossible. How can I prevent them from seeing a screen? That's what our world has become, right? And so that's the issue, is that, you know, what Scotty's saying is that, you know, how can you say this if you haven't actually experienced it or done this, that, or the other thing, right? But that's the concept. You're getting desensitized, right? You guys even pointed out in Magic Kingdom is the way they introduce the LGBT, what QIA, I don't even know what the letter is now, but Mulan, right? You pointed out, they did it as laughing at it first. And your granddaughter was a cross-dresser, ha ha ha. That kind of, they said contempt, right? First it's contempt, then it's normal, then it's embraced, right? So they're slowly desensitizing you to that sort of concept. But when you have somebody who has no exposure, you see what the real response should be. And basically these kids had no screens, okay? No screens. And so he thought, well, let me introduce them to, you know, something positive from media. And what would you say the most positive thing for media for kids might be? What would the first thing, what kind of show would you show them? Yeah, like a nature show. Of course you're going to do that. So he did that. He showed them a nature show. And when they got to the gazelle scene that was caught by the lion, they started screaming. They started wailing because they had never seen actual death, right? I mean, a 6 or 8 year old probably isn't going to see an animal killed. I mean, probably haven't seen, maybe a dog gets hit if they're in the city, but have you seen a gazelle attacked and pulled down in the Serengeti by a lion? They started screaming, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off. Why are you showing this to us? Versus you and I can turn on the news and say, yeah, a 14-year-old was raped yesterday or whatever. And we're like, oh, really? I'll pray for them. And then move on. And I'm just like, you should say, what? No, why are you showing this to me? Right? Because the problem is that you and I, like Scotty pointed out, we're so desensitized, it doesn't even elicit a response. But when Adam and Eve mourned more deeply for the first falling leaf than for their dead, you realize how desensitized we are. Would you mourn over a fallen leaf?
No, I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, because you are desensitized. Like your world is sin. But when you come from a world that is not sin, they mourned. Like, can you imagine? Have you seen somebody mourning at a funeral? I've seen some serious mourning. It says they mourned worse for that leaf that fell than men now mourn for their dead. And that's the thing, is that Scotty is spot on, is you cannot allow yourself to be desensitized, because by beholding, you become changed.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Going back to the metaverse, I read a couple articles, one from Cambridge and one from Oxford, and they had started to do studies on people that had severe phobias. And one way that they would get people over that phobia was to literally put them in a virtual world. So if you had a fear of spiders, some people have a fear of getting on an elevator, some people have a fear of heights, whatever that fear is.
Let's give you VR arachnophobia.
They would literally give you VR, and it only took 1/2 hour to get you over that fear. Half hour of being in... That's what the article said. 1/2 hour of time, they could walk you through it and basically overcome that.
I believe what you're saying. I'm just saying, to put myself in a VR situation when there's a bunch of spiders.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. I would.
It's going to take longer than half an hour.
Yeah.
I'm just using that as an example because that's a common fear. But I mean, I think that is a perhaps viable use of it, and so I don't want us to get away from saying, okay, all VR is evil. Right. I think physical therapy, getting people to comply with exercise, perhaps, you know, desensitization with cognitive behavioral therapy, you know, getting over phobias, etc. You know, because those traumas are real. Right? Like it's
I think there's a positive use to it. Like with all technology, there's an ability to share the gospel around the world with media, what we're doing right now.
Exactly.
Right? So I think that there is a positive use to this VR technology to really help somebody who has struggled in those areas. But also what that tells me is that it's powerful and it's very impactful. And if you have a natural fear, like the Bible says, I will put enmity between your seed and thy seed, you know, and God has instilled in man a natural fear or aversion is a better word, to sin. But it's like all of a sudden, if you're sitting in this virtual world and you're being desensitized to it, we're breaking you down. Now you don't have that fear towards that sin anymore. Now you actually are going to start to enjoy it. Now you're going to start to partake in it, and it just crumbles down from there.
So that brings up a very good question, though. If everything's going metaverse, should the Christian be like, no, stay away from that? Or should we be like, well, how are we going to use that to our advantage?
No, dude, Little Light's already got a channel in the metaverse.
That's right. I mean, imagine like you can build like you can see the statue of Nebuchadnezzar in virtual reality, and it's showing you like these are the kingdoms.
If you don't get censored.
Well, you know,
your bedroom.
I mean, what I was thinking about was, what about all these people that don't have access to the gospel because their government or whatever is, takes a heavy hand toward that kind of thing, and they wind up in the metaverse. Can you go and witness to them or preach to them or tell them about Jesus and they become converted? I mean, you would think that would be a good use of something like that. I'm thinking specifically of countries like China. Or are they going to have a way to block that?
Oh,
Right,
they have a
that's
way to
what I
block
was
it.
gonna
You have to
say.
start talking in code or something.
Censorship.
I think ultimately it comes down to this. We know that it's very powerful. We know that you lose impulse control, right? We know that just the medium itself, like when I picked up the cell phone and we had that buzzing, right? Why was there going to be buzzing? Because this thing throws off radiation. And do you guys remember what World Health Organization said about this a little while ago?
Yeah. Use a headset.
Carcinogenic. And now, not is this going to be near me? I'm going to be a Bluetooth antenna with the screen in front of me now for who knows how long a day,
Yeah,
right?
it could be your job.
Yeah, this is already carcinogenic. We know that, right? And so what are going to be the implications now? So I think it comes down to not only is the media itself damaging to your health? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. They found that screen time even greater than 2 hours increases the risk of high blood pressure in 2 to 10-year-olds. What?
Oh.
But how can, I know it's crazy, but how can you combat that? They found, well, if that same kid had an hour of physical activity a day, they could, try to resist the negative effects. But ultimately, would you want someone to accept the gospel if you knew that their inhibitions were down, if you knew that their impulse control was down, right? It's just like what I tell people in my lectures on the frontal lobe. I say dementia is a frontal lobe inhibitor, traumatic brain injury, alcohol is a frontal lobe inhibitor, right? And then I examine the concept of susceptibility. When you have weakened frontal lobe, you can be suggested to do something, and hey, why don't you read your Bible? Hey, why don't you buy Steps to Christ? Hey, why don't you buy every one of our DVDs right now, right? Would it be good for them to have your DVDs?
Sure.
Well, sure they would. But would you sell it to somebody who was intoxicated?
Yes.
I say, yeah.
Well, no, notice how there was
You
a
need to
delay.
watch this video, buddy.
Well, know that there was a delay there, right? You weren't exactly comfortable with that. And the reason why you're not comfortable with that is the same concept as when I had an atheist in the audience. He asked me this question. He said, if you believe that you're more suggestible, when you're under the influence or whatever these frontal lobe inhibitors are, and you believe that there's angels and demons out there, he was actually kind of mocking me. He's like, well, why doesn't somebody listen to the good angel and go rescue a kitten while they're intoxicated? Why don't they go, preach a sermon while they're intoxicated? Why don't they go do something positive while they're intoxicated? And I said, because it comes down to informed consent. God not only wants you to give full and free consent, but he wants you to be in your right mind when you're doing it, if that makes sense.
No, it's totally
And
makes
if
sense.
you're at the door, knocking on the door, hey, I want to sell you these religious books or religious videos. Oh, sure, I'll buy the whole thing, honey. Right? Would you really accept that? If someone was intoxicated, you wouldn't. And that's the concept, is that the good angels cannot violate your will. I mean, they're going to be resistant to that unless God says, hey, specifically go for it, because God understands the end from the beginning. But as a general rule, right, they're not going to use any compelling force unless it's to protect others. Like with Balaam, they violated Balaam's will and caused him to say, I'm going to bless you, right? It's just like God just took over the mind or something like that for a minute, right? But that was to protect Israel, right? But if the concept is that you feel a little uncomfortable, and you notice that with the hesitancy in our group, we weren't exactly completely comfortable with someone who had maybe a frontal lobe inhibition, maybe an impulse control thing. Would you want them to accept the gospel as an impulse buy? I don't think you would.
You want them in the right mind to make that decision.
And that's the health message, right? We get people, and that's my whole concept. I'm working on this age reversal program, but it's so that your mind is crystal clear, right? Because when you have a healthy, strong, powerful body, you also will have a healthy, strong, and powerful mind, and also a healthy, strong, and powerful spirit. They're not directly correlated, but we know that we're connected, right? And that's the concept, is that you want that person in the metaverse to be 100% sure, to be completely in their right mind, no impulse control issues, no coercion issues, And I think we're seeing that now, is that people are being made to do something when they're coerced, they're bribed, their impulse control's down. It was an impulse buy.
Yeah.
Right?
We'll
That's
give
the
you a
concept.
free donut.
I think that's just how the internet.
Free donut for a year.
The
by way.
internet
Wow.
and
Yeah.
advertising and everything is just like exploiting you where you're at. And it's like, you look at these internet cafes in Asia, you know, where people are spending 16, 18 hours a day there. They can't even feed their kids. They have, you know, their personal life is in shambles, and they're sitting in a chair all day long because they cannot unplug from this thing. So you can imagine the health complications, I'm sure, that are coming from that situation. And then it's like, yeah, then you're you know, throwing at them these life decisions. Now I think we should reach people wherever they're at.
Absolutely.
So I'm on the fence of like exactly how to do that. I could just see that this metaverse thing is going to put people in a very bad situation. How do we reach them with the gospel, and how do we, you know, win them over?
I think we
Not
can.
quite sure
I
on-
think we can use it, but we have to understand the nature of it is addiction, right? Because the concept is you and I can't even stop doing this. Like I have a rule when we're gonna actually go out to lunch, everybody. So you know, the original invitation was, hey, I'll take you guys out to lunch. Actually, I think I contacted Scotty first, and I said, oh, you know what they say in kindergarten: if you bring something for everybody, you got to invite everybody. But then Keith is the more conscientious one here in this group, I can tell. And he said, wait a minute, are you sure you want to take out 8 or 9 of our staff? You remember saying that? So you actually believe in full disclosure.
Yeah.
You believe in, you know, making a
It's
intelligent,
informed consent.
right? Versus me, hey, I'll take your whole staff out to eat. There's 47 staff now. Hey, Tim, we're glad you did that, right? Exactly. So that's the whole concept, is you already, just based on your personality, since you are very conscientious, I can tell, I could tell that even before I met you, like I met you on the shows, is that you're wanting things to be exact, precise, etc. That whole concept, right? Where does that happen? Where are the lines blurred there? And I think that you're right. We should, you know, engage them wherever, but just understand the nature of this is they have designed everything about this for addiction, right? Have you noticed when you refresh, what do? You pull. Does that remind you of anything?
Slot machine.
Well, of course. They've
that's
designed.
crazy.
And
They've
it makes a little
designed.
sound when you get a notification.
does,
Bing,
ba-ding.
oh, I have to check.
This is Pavlov's dog. Like, we're experiencing Pavlov's dog every moment. And I'll be honest with you, all my friends that we go out with, I mean, we're committed, right? But I'm going to have a rule today. And you know what that rule is going to be?
Put your phone
Silence
on.
your phone.
No, if you touch it, you will pay instead of me. That's my rule, my standing rule for all my friends. And we'll try to do stuff like, hey, Brittany, I think you were getting a ride to the airport. Did you put a post on that? Did anyone? Do you need a ride? Did you get one already? Nice try, right? Some of my friends aren't so conscientious as you. They will use manipulation to get out of paying for the meal.
So I have a question then. If
Sure.
we know, because I don't know if you guys have seen Black Mirror.
No.
It's
Tell
kind
us
of
about
like
it.
it's a crazy show that came out, I want to say, in the last 5 years. It's very technological. It has VR, virtual reality. It's very based in like a metaverse type of world.
Okay.
And it's basically about the negative effects of technology. And so if we already know, especially from research with social media, if we already know the harmful effects of like what the metaverse could be and technology in general, why do we still pursue it?
Money.
Like true, but it's like, does the
Control. I would argue it's
benefits
also
outweigh
Control.
Yeah.
the cons? You know, does the pro outweigh the cons? Because sure, you can get people to exercise, but they still have to cater to people who don't want to exercise.
Well, and ultimately, would it be better for us to create a show, right, discussing different issues? Probably would be more effective because we'd have music, we'd have a plot, we've had characters, right? And we'd assign one character to be the one, no, you've got to do good for people no matter what. And we'd have another character and say, no, the ends don't justify the means, right? We'd create kind of some little tension between you guys, because that's what we have to do, right? To create a good show. I mean, you understand that being in Hollywood, doing script design and stuff like that, is that, but that's the question, is would using that media itself of acting, and that's, I think, what you really have your forte in, is that you argue that the media itself of acting with the muses, with the actual entering into the role of that person, where you're having actors channeling dead spirits, like literally Sasha Fierce, right? Who's Sasha Fierce? Well, Sasha Fierce is who she becomes, like Beyonce becomes when she's gonna really kick it. And she even honestly said, she's like, yeah, she's a lot more liberal than I am. Like, I'm kind of shy as just a person. But she enters into another persona, right? I think she's becoming less shy because she's being broken down by Sasha Fierce. That's the whole thing. So I think that's the concept, is the media itself problematic? Is the way it's done itself?
That's an interesting idea, that there are a lot of celebrities that do have these sort of alternate personalities, and that's kind of what the metaverse is offering you as a general populace. You know, it's like they've kind of done this with the elite. Now they're like turning this over to the common person, and you can become multiple people and have, you know, multiple things.
Crazy.
That's the concept, is that you can be whoever you want to be, regardless of actual anatomy, actual physiology, actually hormone profiles, genetic profiles. And that's ultimately what we're wanting, is we're not happy being us, right? But that's because we're lacking God in our hearts. So if we figure, if I get the sex change, I'll be happy. If I make $1 million, I'll be happy. If I am actually in this relationship, I'll be happy. Like I was telling Mikey, there was a guy in Japan that married a character from a video game.
Wow.
You know, and so that's the thing, is that we have a God-shaped hole in our heart, right? And we're looking to fill that in any way possible, in anything that promises it. And the metaverse promises you can be whatever you want to be. You can do whatever you want to do. And that's really the same lie that the media tells you too, like Magic Kingdom. That was another incidence, right? I can do whatever I want. I can be whoever I want.
It's the same lie as in the garden.
Yeah.
You will be like gods, right?
Exactly.
What's to prevent you from, you know, being that god in the metaverse?
You can even create your own worlds. And
Well, yeah, you have enough followers, you probably are kind of a god.
Make everyone subservient to you.
Yeah, that's just really crazy. I think something that I find really interesting, I think that you two mentioned, it's funny how our brains can't tell the difference between reality and virtual reality, but yet with touch, our brains can tell the difference between like an actual physical touch of a person, but not a virtual one.
And that's I think the whole concept, is that you have to understand that, I'm going to go someplace that may be a little uncomfortable for you guys, is that people feel like, have you heard of auras? People talk about auras.
Yeah.
100% new age. But there's an exception to that, is that we are actually each surrounded by an atmosphere that can be charged and influenced by goodness, courage, strength, honesty, integrity, or it can be surrounded by that miasma of unconfessed sin, of fear, of cowardice, of hatred, right? And so it does actually affect us, because when have you ever noticed some people, like, they just, animals don't like them, right? I mean, they just go after them, and then other people are like, the dog just comes over and starts licking them, and it's like, wait a minute, Brittany, are you the dog whisperer? What's going on? But those are actual neurochemical and possibly even electromagnetic things that are changing. They've found that when people are afraid of animals, they secrete a small amount of copper on their skin, and the animal picks up on it immediately, right? And then if the animal knows you're afraid of it, that's the issue. They also have found that some of the animals may also be able to pick up on the amino acids, cysteine and methionine, are more common in meat, so they can sense if you're a meat eater or not, right? And the thing is if they can pick up on those things, how are those going to influence us? I mean, right now, you are surrounded by a cloud, and they've proven that. They've actually had women do specific sensitive hormonal assays, and they're doing it under a hood, full gear, full PPE, the whole 9 yards, and they kept getting, bad results for this estrogen assay. And they finally replaced this girl, because they figured she was incompetent. They replaced her with a guy. They're like, see, it's great. And then they got this even more qualified girl who was like even better. And then she did it, and they threw it off because you're surrounded by a cloud of estrogen.
So how
That,
about
like women who live together,
Yeah.
you know why they cycle together?
Oh, that's think.
yeah.
Because you're surrounded by a cloud, and that cloud influences them around you. And that's the concept, is that I can't send my cloud through the metaverse, right? I can't send you whatever it is that's surrounding me and influence you. And this is a huge cutting edge area of research. They're trying to figure out what it is, right, that is producing these things. And the theory is that it's a hormonal thing. Because just as estrogen can create a cloud around you strong enough to influence the women to start cycling with you, is the endorphin that flows through me strong enough to now cheer you up, right? Is the positive hormonal sort of experience that comes from serving God, satisfaction, right?
Peace.
Yes, exactly. And even non-Christian cultures recognize this. Ikigai is having purpose in your life, right? Have you ever noticed if you meet somebody who has purpose in their life, they're like, whoa, this guy's inspiring. I want to go out and do something now.
Right.
Well, why do you want to do that, right? Is because you've been influenced. And it's not the same as when you watch someone, right? And it's not just the fact they're finding of let's replicate everything to be exactly the same. They can't produce it. They can't produce it in these orphans. The orphans didn't grow, right? They needed something that was different. And I believe personally, it's not just the concept of, oh, this person's my brother, right? I have a relationship with them. Because the Berlin aging studies show that when you have an aged individual in your home, right, they live longer. But hopefully that's not rocket science, right? You're caring with them, they're surrounded by young people, right? They're draining to us, right? Because everyone thinks about that. Oh, my mother's such a burden. I had my grandmother in my home for almost 14 years. She lived to 94, and she was supposed to die at like literally 85. She had a stroke. She was completely paralyzed, couldn't move, had to be turned every 2 hours, and she kept living.
Wow.
And the reason why I believe she kept living was not just that I turned her every 2 hours. I didn't give her Ensure, but I gave her like vegan, organic, blended avocados. Everything went in that G-tube, and I did all the medical stuff possible. But the Berlin Aging Study has proven that not only is that older person going to live longer, every person in the household is going to live longer.
Oh, interesting.
And then they tried to say, because of course the Berlin Health Study is published in the Journal of Human Evolution, right? So they tried to say it's because of the genome, because it's your relatives, right? You're going to pass on a genome. But then they crunched some other numbers, and they found that the non-related caregiver also lived longer.
Wow.
So it's the act of doing unselfishness. It's the act of doing kindness. It's the act of helping the weak, right? Because our understanding in Christianity is the strong are to bear the weak, right? Whereas evolution is the survival of the fittest, right? Hey, get rid of the dead weight. Hey, that person in that nursing home, get rid of them. To us as Christians, those people in nursing homes are the exact people that I'm going to go visit. And what they've shown is when you care for those people to the point of having them in such close proximity as your home, it enhances not only their quantity and quality of life, but it somehow empowers you to live longer as a young person. What's going on there? And I believe that we're all surrounded by this atmosphere, and it's influenced by not only our decisions that we make, but the thoughts that we're thinking, the principles that we cherish, right? Everything around you influences people. I mean, we don't understand how powerful and quick it is. People make a decision about you in 7 seconds. Did you know that? How do they make that decision so fast, right? I believe that it's something, right, around you. It's a visual input, it's a maybe audio perhaps, but in 7 seconds, you're not getting much visual, you're not getting much audio, right?
Right.
What are you making that decision based on? I think these are things that are not quite understood yet. So my argument is going to be, yes, we should try to influence people in whatever way we can, but it's never, ever a replacement for this. Yep.
Sounds like you're living in the real world, man.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing your expertise and your perspective. And I hope this has been a a good discussion for you guys to participate in with us. We hope that you have gained some insight into the human body, into the mind, into the scriptures, and that you can make, informed decision, because that's what we talked about. It's about informed consent, whatever you're going to do. And remember that whatever it is that you're going to do, you should do it to the glory of God. So we thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time. And we just hope that you have a happy Friday. Take care.
Is there any hope for me?
What can I do to unify my family on not watching harmful media?
How do I know my thoughts are my own, and how can I distinguish between impressions from God?
I'm nervous when it comes to sharing my testimony. It is really that important.
I stopped watching mainstream media. Now what?
Sometimes we get a lot of people asking the same kind of questions, so we thought it would be cool to make these little videos answering some of them in a new series called I Got a Question. Concise answers to your media-related questions. We'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us privately on our Instagram page or Facebook. And if you don't use social media, that's all right. Send us an email through our website, littlelightstudios.tv/contact us. Hey, we're here to help. We're here to help you let your little light shine.